Alrighty guys, so this is going to be the nth root and rational equations notes. Arguably this is one of the easier videos and notes that we'll probably do. It's pretty short, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. So the idea behind nth roots is that we're talking about this specific formula or this idea where you have yourself an a value, and the a value is a number, like a constant, like a 2 or a 3, a 10, 100, something like that. But then it has an exponent of m over n. Now, that's what I was referencing in the nth root and also as a rational, okay? So here, this has to be understood that it can convert itself into the nth root. A goes on the inside, m remains as the power. Okay, and believe it or not, this is actually a very important piece of information. Okay, this is a very important piece of information. Okay, so make sure you remember that. Now, I'm going to draw on some different ideas about maybe Algebra 1 skills. So please keep in mind that I'll do my best to explain it. If I do forget to explain a rule, because I assume incorrectly, just let me know and I'll make another video. But for this right here, an example of this happening, we can start off simple, is 4 to the 1/2 power. So this would in turn become a square root of 4. Now, you're familiar with the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. But remember, we said that these square roots were actually not just 2, but plus or minus, okay? Now, that's important because even ends give 2 answers, okay? And that's going to be important later on. So even ends give 2 answers. If you had an odd one, like an 8 to like the 1/3 power, that would be the third root of 8, and that would yield us a 2. But we're not going to go ahead and say plus or minus 2. We're just going to say positive 2. Now, this means that odds, okay, odd ends give 1 answer. Okay, simply that, okay? Evens 2, odds 1, okay? Now, let's go ahead and, of course, as always, up it a little bit more, because otherwise this would be too easy, right? I did only examples that had the numerators as 1. What happens if they're different? Let's see here. Let me do an example like this one. I have 4 to the 5 halves, okay? Now, the way you translate this is you're first going to do the square root of 4, and then you're going to raise it to the 5th power, okay? Now, looking at that right there, that would give us 2, right? Plus or minus our 2. And then we would raise this thing to the 5th power, okay? So, looking at this right here, I would raise 2 to the 5th power. That's going to be... And let me go ahead and break my handy-dandy calculator. 2 to the 5th power, that's 32. So I got negative 32 and or positive 32, okay? Now, that's how you'd go about it. Now, looking at another example that might interest you, let's try doing this one right here. 32 to the negative 3 over 5. Now, the first thing you have to make sure you do is if your exponent is negative, you have to make sure you bring it down to the bottom. Now, what I mean by that is now going into the denominator. Okay? So that right there is going to give you 1 over the 5th root of 32 to the 3rd power. Now, we just got done saying the 5th root of 32 is going to be 2, and then 2 raised to the 3rd power, that's going to be 8. So you would end up with 1 over 8 as your answer. Now, it's not plus or minus because it's odd, okay? Now, big picture, where this is actually all moving is not to this. Let me go ahead and erase everything real quick. There we go. Everything's actually going to be moving towards this right here. It's going to be moving to where we have an x value. So we have like 4x to the 5th power is equal to 128. Okay. Now, what we have to go ahead and be able to do is we have to be able to solve for the x and utilize this understanding of how we convert these rational exponents if need be. Now you'll notice here this isn't a rational exponent. It's actually a whole number. So let me go ahead and show you this one real quick. So you divide by 4 on both sides, okay? And this right here will go ahead and simplify to 1. And then let me get my calculator. 128 divided by 4. That gives us 32. So x to the 5th power is equal to 32. Now, I guess where the rational exponent comes into play is because in order to get rid of a 5, remember it's always the opposite or its reciprocal. So we actually have to go ahead and do a raise it to the power of 1/5, okay? But if I raise it to the power of 1/5, then that means over here I've got to raise this to the power of 1/5. So now this guy right here, this 32, indeed has a rational exponent because these will simplify to just x. And then 32, well, to the 1/5 power, that's just like saying 5, or the 5th root of 32, and that's just simply 2. So x equals 2. So that's kind of where all this is going. Let me do another example. There we go. And then let's see here. Let's try this one. X minus 3 to the 4th power is equal to 21. Alrighty, so in order to get rid of this, we can't just dive into what's inside the parentheses because of PEMDAS. We have to do the outer first, right? So this right here, to get rid of that 4, I have to do the opposite of it, which is a 1/4. But if I do a 1/4 here, then that means I have to raise this 21 to the 1/4 power, okay? Now, looking at this right here, these simplify, and you're left with x minus 3 is equal to the 4th root of 21. Now, this right here is not going to be a very pretty number, okay? And also because it's an even in, it's plus or minus, okay? Because it's even. So looking at this right here, we'd have x is equal to, because we'd add 3 to the other side, 3 plus or minus the 4th root of 21. Now, you could do the 4th root of 21, and you would get a decimal, and then you would either add 3 or, of course, subtract it, okay? So our two answers are going to be 3 plus the 4th root of 21, and or x equals 3 minus the 4th root of 21. So those would be your answer choices, okay? So be aware of that, okay? Let's do another example. Let's try this one. Let's do 1. Oh, gotta get my pencil. 1/6 x to the 3rd is equal to negative 36. Well, now here, we can't just go straight to the exponent. We have to actually handle this 1/6 first. We need to multiply by 6 on both sides, because that will simplify, giving us x to the 3rd. So we then have negative 36 times 6. So let me see what that is. That's 216. Okay. Now, and of course, negative 216, right? We got to do the reciprocal of this. So we got to multiply or raise it to the 1/3 power. So that means we're doing that here. Okay. So that means these will simplify, giving me x is equal to the cube root of negative 216. Now, a lot of you might be looking at this going, okay, this is where we use our imaginary numbers. And that's only partly true. The reason it's partly true is because we only use I when we have even ends, okay? We only use I when we have even ends. We don't use I when it's odd, okay? Because believe it or not, your calculator can go ahead and do this, and go ahead and try it. I'll even do it on my calculator. 216 negative cube root it, it's -6. So you have the ability to take the cube root, the fifth root, the seventh root of negative numbers, and it works out just fine. Okay, works out just fine. So now remember though, it's not going to be plus or minus. It's just one answer, right? Because it's also n is odd. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay, and then I guess I'll do one more grand finale. Let me see. Let's try this one. Let's do x plus 10 to the 5th power is equal to 70. Alrighty, so we have to go ahead and handle the exponent on the outside because parentheses are first. So we need to multiply by a 1/5 and then a 1/5. So that gives me x plus 10 is equal to the 5th root of 70. Now, I'm unsure if that comes out nicely, so let's go ahead and give this one a shot. So let's do 70, 5th root, and it gives me a decimal. So I've got like x is equal to, well, let me back up so you can kind of see where I'm going. I've got x plus 10 is equal to 2.34, okay? Now, it's not plus or minus because it's an odd, okay? But I can go ahead and subtract the 10 to the other side, so I've got x is going to be equal to 2.34 minus 10. Subtract 10 from that, and you get roughly x is equal to -7.6, something like that, okay, if you round and stuff. So that'll be your answer. Now, you could have left your answer if you wanted to as x is equal to the 5th root of 70 minus 10. I mean, these mean the same thing. These are both equal to each other. It's just a preference, okay? They mean the same thing. Alrighty, guys. Now, that's it for right now. What you'll be doing is make sure you watch this video. If you have any questions or concerns, please make me aware. The only big thing that I want you to remember is if your exponent's negative, so like if you have 8 to the -2/5, you got to make sure that you toss that guy down below, okay? You got to make sure you do that, okay? And then that ends up being the 5th root of 8 squared, okay? So over 1, okay? So just be aware of that. That's the only big thing. Other than that, it's just a little bit of adding, subtracting, multiplying, stuff like that. Alrighty, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Alrighty, bye.